Well, April is Financial Literacy Month, and there are questions as to what's the level of knowledge of an average Nigerian on finance, budgeting, investments, credit, insurance, and the financial system. We have Folusha Badamusi. She's the Executive Director of Junior Achievement Nigeria. She's very active in this area. I've had her on a show not so long ago, but she's here again since we're celebrating the month. Good to see you again, Folusha. Good morning.
Good morning, Inni. Thanks for having me.
Good. So when we're talking about being knowledgeable in finance, budgets, and the financial system, insurance, for an average person, someone who is not a professional in the area, what should I know?
Okay, so when we're talking about being knowledgeable, it really just means having at least a basic understanding, right, of what personal finance, budgeting is. Also having the ability to understand different financial terms, so things like insurance, things like managing debt, things like savings, all those different things are actually extremely important as individuals, get older, as they work, as they live, because as you know, there are actually different parts of financial literacy, and there's also different principles that everybody should know, right? So for instance, we should know what it means to earn. We should know how much it is we're spending. We should have an idea of how much it is that we need to save for the kind of future that we want. We should have ideas about different things that we can invest in. We should know when, if ever, we should even borrow. And we should also know how to protect our money, right? So these are some of the different things that individuals should know when it comes to financial literacy.
And, well, unfortunately, a CBN report reveals that about 53.4% of adults in Nigeria do not know or have a rough idea of what they've spent in the past week, or over 50% know how much money is available. How important really is it? Do I have a book or have a notepad where when I spend, maybe I buy airtime, I put it somewhere? How important is this? How should we go about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the statistics are very interesting. In fact, I personally question if they're even, completely accurate, because I feel like the percentage might even be higher than what that report says. There's a quote by Warren Buffett that I really like. It says, "Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving," right? So ultimately, many of us need to understand what it actually means to budget, because budgeting means that you have an idea of how much it is you're actually spending on different things. So not having an understanding of, for instance, how much you're spending on airtime, how much you're spending on data, how much you're spending on food, how much you're spending on power, especially with the inflation rates that we just heard at 15.9%, where everything has actually increased in price. Last week, the cost of meat and pepper at the market is different from what it is this week. So we actually need to be very intentional in this particular season about budgeting and about saving. So what does that mean, to your question? It does mean that we should track. And what does tracking mean? Tracking should not scare us. You don't need to get any fancy device or any fancy app. You can just write it in the notepad of your phone, or you can have a notepad, like you said, a physical notepad where you're writing what you're spending every day. And at the end of the week, you can actually add up what you spent on data, what you spent on airtime, what you spent on food, what you spent on all the different things that you spend money on in your life. Because also, daily expenses differ for different people. And so we can't say that, this is what everybody is going to be doing every day. It really depends on what you do as an individual. Do you have a family? Are you single? And so on and so forth. So we just need to find a place that we're making a note of every single thing we're spending, and then we're adding that up, and then we can then make a comparison with how much we're actually earning and determine, okay, can I even afford some of the things that I've been able to afford in the past? I think something that the inflation rate has taught many of us in this time is that there are many things that you could actually afford that you might not be able to afford anymore. So the question then is, should you continue to spend money on certain things? Do you need to find ways to make more income so that you can afford those things if there are things that you must spend money on? So it's really us just not being ignorant of the importance of us having the tracking of the things that we spend our money on, and then being intentional about being able to really decide, okay, should I be spending my money on these things? Can I even afford these things? Keeping in mind that we're currently at a season in Nigeria where the inflation rate is getting a bit out of hand.
Yeah, well, inflation everywhere is getting out of hand at this time.
Yeah,
But
it
talking
is
about,
actually.
yes, it is. So talking about saving now, a lot of us know to save in the bank. Now, apart from the investments, we'll get to that later. And then what rights do people have? Because recently, I don't know if you've been on social media recently, you will see a lot of complaints. People say they're being debited. People say they are being charged. Now, of course, the CBN has the right and has given the guidelines, you know, as to charges of transactions. What rights do people have with their banks? At what point do we get a situation where banks can report, freeze, or block an account? And what can people do to protect themselves?
Okay. So I think that there's two parts to your question, right? And the first part is me as an individual that owns a bank account and the kind of charges I'm getting, and sometimes feeling like you're getting charges that you don't understand. Ignorance is never an excuse, and I know that many of us actually don't really know what we're signing up for sometimes when we open up different types of bank accounts. But it is very important that if you don't understand what the charges are, that you actually ask your bank, right? You need to ask questions. So if you are constantly getting charges and those charges don't make sense to you, please ask. And a lot of banks will actually take the time to explain to you what those charges are. I know that there are some charges that the banks have to do by regulation. It's not really, a choice that they have, but it's also something that needs to be explained to people like you and I who might have just opened up a bank account and don't understand what the charges may be. Now, the second part of your question, which goes to, I think that you were asking about the rights,
limits and rights, and then freezing and reporting of transactions.
Yeah, so the bank actually has a great responsibility to the regulator, which is the CBN, right? So the CBN can, ask banks about accounts at any point in time. And nowadays, because of a lot of interesting transactions on the internet, because of the fact that we're in the information age, and there are certain types of people that are making money in, I want to call them illegal ways. There are some things that are happening at a lot of banks where sometimes CBN and even the law enforcement officials, have to go to the banks and ask them about certain individuals. And that is all within the rights of the law enforcement officials and the CBN. It's actually not just in Nigeria, it's actually a worldwide thing. That's why, there's a lot of acts, against anti-money laundering and so many different acts that, like you said about inflation, it's not just a Nigerian thing, it's actually a worldwide thing. So yeah, there are many questions that can be asked about your personal account, especially if it is flagged as an account that perhaps there's fraud on it, or an account that has been engaging in illegal activities.
Yeah, and I know that recently, I think about 2 weeks ago, some banks were actually fined by the CBN because they did not report crypto transactions, which, the CBN has already talked against even before now.
Exactly. And, that's why it is important for us not to be too ignorant on certain things, right? So you cannot really get upset with the CBN or get upset with the banks when there are certain things that, for instance, a country has deemed as illegal, and those things are happening. The bank must report to the CBN. And unfortunately for those banks that didn't report it, they then have to pay a large fine.
And then, so let's look at the investment now. I mean, as you noted, these days they are very interesting times. Sometimes you have some very mouth-watering promises on investment. So how can an average person differentiate between the real thing and the fluke?
Amy, that's such a great question. And I find that when it comes to investment, one of the greatest policies that you can have in your own head is, if it looks too good to be true, or if the return is too good to be true, then it probably is too good to be true. I've seen so many, investment vehicles or offers where when you look at what they are promising you, if you just look at it and it doesn't make sense to you, then more than likely it doesn't make sense. I think that investing is one of those things that we have to develop patience for. Investing is something that you really have to have that mindset that it's going to take some time for you to maybe start to make the kind of returns that you desire. So the returns might start out, a bit low, but over time it grows. the summary for me for that, honestly, is if it looks too good to be true, then it is too good to be true. Now, fortunately as well, in this day and age, we do have the internet, so we can go online and, do some research on some of the companies that are offering us maybe certain investment opportunities or certain investment packages. Also, every financial institution is supposed to be regulated by the CBN. So if the organization that is coming to you to ask you to invest is not one that is regulated by the CBN, then you might want to think twice about investing with them. The other thing also is that, we all have different risk appetites, right? Some people have a high risk appetite, some have a low, some have a medium. When you are investing, it's very important that you determine what your risk appetite is. Do not follow your friend that has a high risk appetite if you know that your own risk appetite is low, because your friend might not mind losing money, because they do high risk, which comes with higher returns, whereas you, with a low risk, might then get very upset, if you lose that money. We should also aim to invest money that if we do lose it, we will not be too upset, especially if you're just starting out with investing, because investing is something that we need to develop a culture for, but it's also something that can burn you very easily. And if you do get burnt, there's a chance that you might decide, I'm never investing my money again, So I would always say, try to start with the low risk type of investments, do the investments that it might take longer to get your returns. And remember that if it looks like it's too good to be true, then it probably is too good to be true.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, about that thing that they said, and which you just, don't invest money that you cannot afford to lose. At what point do I now invest for a second stream of income? For instance, I'm working here, I earn a salary, but I want something to buffer my income, So at what point do I say, oh, this is good, I want something that I can use as a second stream of income, this is good enough, I can put a bulk of maybe 1 month's earning, 2 months or savings over time. At what point do I take that decision?
So I think that for decisions that have to do with your investment money becoming like a second income, right, as you said, so something that maybe can give you returns that you can kind of spend on your day-to-day, as an example. So what we spoke about earlier, like your budgeting, so money that is almost just like, free-ish money, because you can then use that money that you're using something else to gain from to spend. I think for those ones, you should just go with the low risk investments, and you should definitely make sure that you're going with accredited financial institutions. Now, even within the accredited financial institutions, they will tell you the different levels. They will tell you the low, the medium, and the high. And usually what happens is that even if you lose money with the high, they will tell you the minimum beyond which you cannot lose money. So I think that for those types of investments, you need to be extremely careful, and you need to go with either extremely trusted organizations, or if it's a person. So I know that quite a few people have, started doing things like pulling funds together as maybe like friends or groups, right? Make sure that the terms are clear, right? So make sure that this is something that has an agreement, the terms are clear, and that you understand what it means. So for instance, read the fine print. The fine print always says things like, okay, this is the minimum amount of money that you would get back in the event that this investment fails. You should know what that is, and you should be convinced and comfortable that if you only get that minimum back, you would be okay. So the summary of it is that you should make sure that you read the fine print, and you should also make sure that you do it with accredited institutions, such that if anything happens, you will definitely get something back. And be sure that the minimum that you get back, as written in the fine print, is something that you are comfortable with in the long run.
And I guess also that the process, of getting a payback if something happens, I'm talking of engaging legal services, that should also be spelled out from the beginning, because I think back here in Nigeria, unlike places like the US, we trust our word of mouth so much that when something happens, there's no proof, to say we agreed this and we agreed we're going to do this. So I guess that is something else. That's something else we should have at the back.
And you know what? It's really interesting that we seem to trust word of mouth so much, especially when we see many people that have been burnt. And so that's why I think it's one of those things also that we cannot be ignorant about. Even if it's you and a friend, or you and a group of friends, put up an agreement, like a draft agreement, between all of you, and let everybody sign, so that there's no stories at the end of the day of somebody saying, oh, I didn't know that this is what I was getting myself into, or I didn't know that this was the minimum. Let it be clear. And also, Ini, I think just to just to kind of close on that is make sure that you understand what you're signing or what is happening. If you don't understand it, I would say that you should not do it. And you should go and do it with somebody or an organization that you actually understand what it is that they're doing. So if you don't understand what the investment is, what the transaction is, please do not do it, no matter how attractive the returns look.
Don't be greedy.
Don't be greedy.
Don't be greedy. And all of this is another way that, according to the World Bank, extreme poverty can be reduced in Nigeria and other countries. So we do hope that more people... Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, that is also why at Junior Achievement Nigeria, we spend so much time teaching the youth about financial literacy. Because the truth of the matter is that countries that have more financially literate people are doing better than countries that do not. So it's actually very important for all of us, myself and yourself included, even to, you know, teach our children, teach our loved ones, teach our nieces, our nephews, you know, give them an idea of what financial literacy is from a young age. Let them know what it means to earn, what it means to save, what it means to spend, what it means to donate. Let them understand those basic things about financial literacy and budgeting as well, so that as they get older, they do not overdo, you know, as it is.
Yes, I like the overdue part. Thank you so much for Olusegun Gbedamosi, Executive Director, Junior Achievement Nigeria. Thank you so much for that enlightenment, and we do hope that it goes far down there with our viewers.
Thank you.